Okay, today I'm covering basic painting. So I have a Thing action figure in front of me that's a custom Marvel Legends. It was a commission. Um, Basically, somebody wanted a spiky Thing figure that is crazy spikes everywhere, jagged. So it's already pre-sculpted. It's already done. Now we're in the painting phase. So if you look at the figure, you can see like there's stuff underneath that hasn't been covered with a base coat yet. So we're gonna kind of just cover base coating at this point, and then I'm gonna try to get into some stuff like washing and some more advanced techniques later. So this is really just what a lot of people ask. They don't even know how to paint. So we're gonna cover how to paint. So the first thing you need to do with any action figure when you're painting or any miniature, whatever, is it needs to have a surface that adheres. So I use primer. There's two primers I use primarily now. If I'm going for a darker, I'm using this Duplicolor vinyl and fabric. It comes in multiple colors. I haven't really experimented too much with that. I use the gray. It's a light gray. And the newest paint primer that I'm using is Citadel White Scar paint. If you're looking for a white primer, because you're using lighter color paints, it's ideal. It goes on really smooth. So I would use those two as your base after you've already prepped your figure by sanding and smoothing everything down so that primer and paint will adhere to it. Biggest mistake I get from people is they're taking paint and they're just basically taking it right out of one of these paint pots and they're applying it to the figure or the miniature or whatever the heck they're doing. That's not the right way to do it. If you're doing it that way, it's gonna look terrible. So I have a large, actually it's an extra large base brush because I have a ton of surface to cover with this figure. It's a large figure. It's probably about 9 inches tall. So it's even large for a Marvel Legends figure. So you're probably not going to need this type of brush for a miniature or something. You're going to use something smaller, something more in the lines of, let's see if I have any in here. Something like one of these, just to be able to put it on there. It's a normal Tamiya modeling brush. So I'll get into paint brushes and stuff in a different video. But what I'm doing is I'm basically dipping in here and I'm using this swatch of cardboard as a palette. I like working with a wet palette, but I really am just doing dry at this point. I'm sorry, I'm doing a dry palette that's gonna dry up on me. You can see I basically took a generous amount of paint. I still have it on the brush. I'm dipping it into this water pot and I'm taking just regular water and putting it on here, and I'm kind of eyeballing it. What I'm looking for when I mix it is to dilute the paint to a thin layer that's almost like a milk consistency, that's not too thick. And what I'm going to start doing with this brush, I'm going to move this pot out of the way now, slide this over a little bit so you have a better view of the actual figure painting itself, is I'm going in here and I'm looking, again, I'm using a big brush because I'm trying to get a maximum amount of coverage. This is for your base. I already have one layer on. This is my base coat number 2. I'm trying to cover the figure. If I'm trying to do detail work, I'm not using this type of brush. If I were, that would be stupid because this is not a detail brush and it's not going to do the coverage that I want. I'm trying to basically just get everything that you can see, that gray, that's the primer. I'm trying to cover the gray. So if I get any on the pants, shorts, trunks, whatever you want to call them, don't worry about it because we're going to cover that up with detail later. Right now, we're just trying to cover the primer. So the primer is there to adhere to the sculpt. I cheated a little bit by using Abe's terracotta sculpt. So I use this type of epoxy sculpt. It's part A, part B. I happen to use terracotta, which is orange, when doing the thing. So that gave me a good base already, but then I still primed over top of it. And the reason I used it is This is going to a customer, and while the customer is an artist himself, and I trust that the artist will handle this thing with care, you never know if something's going to fall off a shelf. There's going to be an earthquake. There's going to be something that happens that damages the figure. If any of these spikes break, then we're good, because the material is that orangey terracotta natural color, and it's very similar to this base that I'm using, this base color that I'm using anyway. So no harm, no foul. Again, just trying to cover as much as I possibly can, and I'm getting pretty dry on the palette. So I'll just take more out of the paint pot, get more water, mix more. And you're doing thin layers. You're gonna have to do multiple layers for your base coats. If you're doing too thick, it's gonna look horrible. That's if you've ever seen paint jobs on miniatures or custom figures that look bad, mainly it's because people haven't done the prep work on them. The sanding, the cleaning of the figure. People don't realize they have to clean stuff with soap and water because it has mold release on it from when it comes out of the injected mold at the factory. So you can see this thin layer isn't covering. You can still see green through here, and that's okay. Because when I hit this area on my second pass, then I'm good to go. I know that I have to do multiple coats. But if you're rushing it, and you're trying to get this thing done all at once, and you're not patient, and you're not letting it fully dry, you're gonna wind up getting clumpy paint with chunks in it, thick, kind of like the consistency of whiteout. I've seen people do customs with whiteout, which just look horrific. And I'm using this Citadel paint. I'm using the base because that's what it's made for. It has more pigmentation, and it's made specifically for that. Now, when we get into other techniques in the paint in this channel, we'll talk about washes, shades, dry brushing. We'll talk about how to shadow, how to highlight, and how to do all that. But if you don't have a good base that has 2 coats minimum, you're not going to be able to do any of those advanced techniques. So yeah, is this boring? Yep. But look at how much better this looks already from where we started. And I'm just going to kind of spin this thing because there's so many nooks and crannies in here. I can't see all of it. Like if we slide it back now, like I couldn't see that a minute ago. Look here, you can see that in the crevices, it still needs, a base coat. And I couldn't see that a minute ago because I had it turned at a different angle. So it's the matter of being detailed and thorough, as well as using the right tools, the right paintbrush, the right paints, and letting it dry. So again, like I said, we're just trying to get coverage at this point, and then we'll worry about the other stuff later. This is just the base coat. Doesn't mean you could do sloppy on a base coat, because this is your base for everything. If you have a weak base, it's like having a weak core with workout. Nothing else is going to work the way that it should, no matter how good you are. Just slide it back so you guys can see it a little bit better. There we go. I'm just getting the coverage. So you can see the detail in the sculpt. I mean, I sculpted each one of these spikes individually. I put a ton of detail in there to make them look rocky. There's not one spike on this thing that's symmetrical with another one somewhere else on it. So it's what I wanted. It's what the customer wanted. Some of them were really jagged. Some of them were kind of lumpy. Some of them are just mushed rocks that are crushed. There's some broken points that were done on purpose that look like he's been through some battles. Each of those are ultimately going to get painted slightly differently after we're done this whole process. And I'm not going to paint each spike individually. We're going to see in the next series of videos on this figure how different paints will help you achieve different looks. We're going to talk about how to put highlights on the higher points, how to put lowlights and shadowing and shading, and we're going to talk about how to get washes into all of these crevices that I sculpted so that the detail pops on this figure. The customer paid for all of this detailing and the sculpt work, so we have to make sure that our paint job does it some justice. And got a pretty good paint. We got a pretty good base coat on here now. There's some rough edges in here. Everyone's very specific for some broken points. This is time consuming. So don't think you're going to be able to start a figure, finish a figure in the same day. Don't think you're going to be able to start a miniature and be done with it at once unless you're cheating with contrast paints, which frankly I don't think look great. Look at my other video on the contrast paints, but they definitely don't look good for larger figures. They might work fine for, you know, a Warhammer or Dungeons and Dragons miniature if you're trying to army paint, like army build, but they look terrible when we're moving through something this big. That's specifically something this big that has articulation. And that's the difficulty with people don't realize with painting custom action figures, is you're dealing with moving parts. So when you're sculpting, you have to engineer. And when you're painting, you have to make sure that you don't have paint issues called paint rub, where the joints are making contact against another part of the action figure. If you have that, you're going to run into issues and you're going to have sloppy work. And I will tell you, as an artist, it is your reputation, especially if you're selling your stuff. It's not a large community. People will know who you are and people will know your work. So if you're not painting well, everyone will know it. I will tell you, I think, besides watching the tutorial videos, not just my own, watch other people's on there, learn a lot from miniature painting. There's way more miniature painting videos online than there are custom action figure painting. So look at those, watch those, learn techniques from those, improve, practice. It's the only way you get good at it. Otherwise your stuff's always gonna look amateur. There may be classes by you somewhere. And when I say classes, they're usually free at like one of those Warhammer places or Games Workshops or something local like that. So again, this is base coat stuff. I know I'm not really showing you the finished figure yet. Will be a reveal. If you guys haven't, please like, subscribe, and check out the Instagram and Facebook pages for the same name. You'll be able to see a whole lot more stuff and more works in progress stuff as I go. Because as much as I want to make the YouTube channel a thing, I still wind up posting there first. So this is base coating. And so what we would do now is pretty much just hang out and wait for it to dry. I'm gonna go do other stuff because there's nothing else I can do with this one right now. That's why I usually work on a couple projects simultaneously, because I can't do anything more with this until it's done. And if I rush it in like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so, then we're gonna wind up with clumps, and I'm gonna pull paint off of spikes, and it's gonna look like crap. So what I do now is work on something else. Working on another thing figure, the damaged Wolverine battle thing. I can work on that. I can work on a million different things that are kind of in progress simultaneously. And while I'm working on that stuff, I can, this thing will dry, and then I'll be able to move into the next thing. So this is basically base coat number 2. The next time you'll see this figure, the base coating will be done, including the trunks, which I'm gonna go with the dark color scheme, the navy blue with the white belt, versus the classic look, because this one I want this to have more edge. This, instead of the lighter blue is a little bit more friendly, and I want this guy to look a little bit more badass. So that's really it. So if you want to see the continuation of these videos, I'll eventually link them all together when I get into the next one will be how to use shades and washes on this figure. So you'll see the continuation. That'll be a linked video eventually. So if you're watching this later on, there may be a link to it or not. If you're watching it as it goes up, there won't be. So just, if you want to catch it when it actually hits, which will be some point, maybe this week, next week, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That's it. Feel free to ask any questions and make any comments down below. If you are looking for custom work done, feel free to email me. Thanks for checking it out.